Hi Wolfers, a new topic for a new week. So this time we're going to talk about something that is very fascinating because it's almost pretty much like an art. It goes beyond science, goes beyond best practice, goes beyond regular work and becomes something a little bit magical. That's demand sensing. That's basically, the art of predicting the spike before it occurs and it hits your warehouse. And this obviously goes so way beyond the traditional demand planning approaches. That's something that, as a matter of fact, has started to be talked about just a few years ago. We're talking probably around a decade, just slightly more, but basically it's something very, very recent. And there is still a lot going on. I mean, it's an art that is still being fine-tuned in a way. Now, this is very relevant. Obviously, it's very important for pretty much any industry, to get a good sense and be on top of the sort of like inventory refill, avoiding stockouts, and obviously preventing, big stock build-ups. In the case of retail and pharma, which are like two of the industries that we serve most here at Bold Practice, clearly this is particularly important. If you think about pharma, logically there is an element of public health involved. If you talk about retail, competition is so fierce that you really run into a serious losing sales if you cannot really keep your shelves filled. So one of the main issues really is that your systems can be very good, but they are just as good as the data that you put in. And more often than not, unfortunately, systems are waiting for data that are lagging, data that are coming in late and sometimes incomplete. And that's why basically you might not necessarily be ready to satisfy the demand when the hit goes on. So I want to give you quick insights onto things that you could really monitor. The first one that's specific for pharma is the prescription fill trends. So it's something that might be a little bit easier in some markets compared to others, but it's important to at least try and have a sense on what's getting prescribed and how often that gets really filled. If we move to retail instead, it's very, very important to have control over point of sales data. So being able to access point of sales data ideally as quickly as possible. So with as little delay, as little lag as possible. And of course, you might want to take a look at the stock through rates as well. And the other thing that is actually very, very peculiar to demand sensing, but as I mentioned at the beginning, it's one of the things that is still being fine-tuned, is social sentiment. By example, Google Trends, and chatter that is going on there on the web about new upcoming launches of new products. Okay, that's an important signal. It becomes even more important again for the case of like new product launches where you don't really have historical data to rely on. But we'll be talking about getting new product launches right in a different way. So no worries about that. We'll get back to this. Now, if these things we just mentioned are elements that have to be monitored, on the other side, there are things that you could do already to act a little bit faster and react a bit more promptly towards demand changes and sudden demand spikes. The first thing is refreshing your forecasting model every 7 days. So once a week, you review and refresh your forecast. Secondly, you may want to have dedicated alerts when there are sharp demand changes. And you can really argue and align internally on what you qualify as a sharp demand change. But that's something that in any case, it's important to define and monitor ideally automatically. And number 3, having data is good and it's important, but you need to act on those data. So you might want to make sure that you integrate those data in your system and not just leaving them somehow dead or half dead on a dashboard. Okay, so they need to be acted upon. So anything that you can do to integrate with your system, automate to a possible extent, would actually pay significant dividends. Now, remember, not all signals are perfect. Sometimes they lack a little bit of accuracy. But if they're early, they're still very, very valuable. So do not underestimate. Now, if you want to dig a little bit deeper into the demand sensing topic, I suggest you actually take a look at the document that is below here. There's a link to a demand sensing playbook. So you can download it for free. And likewise, you can have a chat with us for free. And we can discuss together what are your common challenges, pain points, and how we can potentially address them. How can we work together? Or, worst case scenario, you get some suggestions, tips, free of charge. So it's worth engaging into this. So I look forward to talking to you. And I look forward to the next video that is going to come next week. Until then, take care.